Are you sick of just feeling tired all the time and feeling your energy levels are quite low? Now, you're not alone because this is a very common thing that happens with many people, especially when we have the daily grind of life, whether it be work, family activity, or everything else in between. Now, on today's episode, I've got you covered because not only am I going to look at the reasons why I believe people have low energy levels, but I'm also going to give you some tips and techniques on how you can boost your energy. Now, from a scientific perspective, when you look at energy, most people think about it from a perspective of input and output. So essentially what you eat or ingest orally gets converted into a form of energy in the form of ATP that then gets utilized by your body in order for you to do your daily activities. And essentially, this is a very simple way of looking at energy and what most people look at. The only challenge is that I was coming across many of my patients and even acquaintances that were twice or even 3 times my age and were just full of energy. And because I got the time to spend with them, I actually went through it with them in order to find out what was their secret in terms of having this abundant amount of energy and what were they doing that others were not doing. So by no means is this a hard and fast rule or science by itself, but this is essentially how I broke it down based on that information that I learned from them and what I'm going to share with you. So I divided it into these 3 main pillars that affects how much energy we have. The first one would be the basics, or the building blocks that we live with. The second one would be physiology and pathology that affects the energy levels that we have. And finally, you have the mental component or psychology. So let's start with the first one, which is the basic principles or the foundation blocks. Now, if you've been on this journey with me before, you would have heard me ranting about sticking to the basics. And this includes eating well, sleeping well, moving and managing your stress. Now, when it comes down to eating well, as I mentioned earlier, it is an input and output factor. So whatever you put into your body will then get transferred, or is the fuel that then gets transferred into the cells of your body to energize you. Now, most people, it's not hard to say, understand what unhealthy food is, whether it be junk or food full of sugar versus healthy food, which is quite nourishing, it is quite natural, and it is not processed. So most people know that differentiation. But if I were to take it another level, I would say that for every person that thinks they're eating healthy food, you have to work out whether that food is appropriate for your body. Now, what may be healthy for others and where they feel quite energized might be different for yourself. So it will require a bit of experimenting to realize that these foods make you feel quite light and energized, and these foods actually make you feel heavy and quite sluggish. So you need to play around. Now, just for completion's sake, I am going to add supplementation because this is something that everyone talks about because they feel that despite eating well, maybe if they supplement their diet with supplements, they would feel a boost of energy. Now, the reality is if you're eating really good, nutritious food, you can get most of your micronutrients from your food. But despite eating good, nutritious food, if you feel you need to supplement, some of the basic supplements that will cause an increase in energy include your vitamin Bs, your vitamin Cs, magnesium, and even iron through the form of food, hopefully, but also through supplementation if you're not absorbing enough iron. The next would be sleep, and this is a non-negotiable. For most people, they kind of know how much sleep they actually need, whether it be 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, even 9 hours of sleep. But what happens when you're actually getting the hours that you think you need, yet you're waking up quite exhausted? Now, there's a couple of reasons this can happen. One of them being that you potentially are having too big a meal at night before you go to sleep, or you're eating too close to bedtime. And those are 2 common reasons why your energy levels will be quite low, and also the fact that this would affect your sleep and you feel that you're not actually quite rested. You have to remember that despite you wanting to go to sleep or resting, your body is like a factory having to work on what you've ingested to break it down through digestion in order to create energy. And so it's better to eat your meals at least 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed, which is a very basic principle that many people forget about just because we have busy schedules. So if you can try to aim to eat a smaller meal and aim for 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed, that would be a lot more beneficial in terms of improving your sleep at night. Now, despite this, if you still feel that you're waking up quite tired, the other big factor that I'm about to mention is probably stress. The way I look at stress is that it's almost like the glue that puts the foundation blocks or the basic principles all together. Now, if you're not having healthy stress or you're not managing your stress and you're moved into a more chronic stressful state that most of us go through, then this would cause a lot of issues in terms of the amount of energy that you have. Now, the best definition that I come up with when it comes down to stress is having high expectations and not meeting your goals, and that gap that is bridged between the two. Now, when you have high expectations and then you don't reach your goal, you often are quite disappointed. So, for example, you had a list of things to do on the day and you just did not get to completing that task, you might feel a bit disappointed, and all of a sudden it increases the amount of stress that you feel within your body. Having stress is actually a good thing, and it's probably healthy to have stress because that leads to quite a lot of growth. But when you have unhealthy stress whereby these expectations are not met on a routine daily basis and it's happening every time because you have these high expectations, then this can lead to chronic stress, and again, as a result, can lead to lower levels of energy. Now, the next basic principle would be movement and exercise. Now, for the longest time, I used to think that walking was a waste of time and that getting the best bang for buck by being absolutely productive and having a high intensity interval training was the best way to go because I could get a great workout in a shorter period of time. But I've changed the way I think about it because I believe that for everyone, you should be having an isolated period of time in your day where you can be relaxed and just focused on movement, whether it be high intensity interval training, it could be running, it could be cycling, it could be rowing, it could be some sports that you enjoy, it could be even weight training. And you should have a period of time during the day where you feel quite relaxed and you can just focus on exercising and moving. And this could be walking as well, because this then allows you to rest, your heart rate to increase, to get a little bit of a sweat and just feel quite energized. Now, for most people who are not used to exercising, initially you might feel quite tired. You might think that this is a silly thing to do because now you've gone from feeling like you have low energy levels and now you're feeling like your energy levels are even lower. But I can promise you that if you continue to exercise and you do it routinely for at least 30 days, maybe 5 times a week, and it doesn't have to be high intensity, it could be a couple of walks a week, you will find this makes a huge difference in how much energy you feel and how much clarity you have in your mind. Now, the next component we have is physiology and pathology, and this includes illnesses and diseases. Now, I've already mentioned part of physiology, which is your digestive processes, then getting converted to energy. But there's also other factors, such as your hormonal factors, that can drive a lot of these energy processes within your body, which is not related to diseases or chronic conditions. Now, the biggest challenge that I think that happens for most people is that when they have that shift where they feel their energy levels are kind of drop to the bottom, they almost feel that there's something wrong with them and they may have a disease process going on. Now, in my experience, most people that are healthy or youngish, anywhere between 30, 35, up to about 55 or 60, would generally have no conditions or disease processes that is going on causing this drop in energy. By no means am I saying that you should not go and see a health practitioner and get it tested, but oftentimes you will be disappointed because based on the testing, they may not find an exact cause or what is causing this drop in energy. With aging, the physiological response that happens as a result of aging may cause a drop in your hormonal levels. Now, with women, they might be going through perimenopause, whereby they have a drop in the female hormones, whether it be estrogen or even progesterone. And in men, it could be their testosterone levels, as well as some of the female hormones, which may be contributing to this drop in energy. It's also important to remember that your thyroid creates thyroid hormones that can regulate a lot of the processes of things like how hot you feel, how cold you feel, how quickly you digest, or even the lack of energy that you feel as a result of having dysfunction within your thyroid. So if you do feel your energy levels are affected, by all means, you should still get it tested, because you may have a condition or pathology in the form of a disease that may be causing it. But generally, people will find that their tests come back normal, and they'll be wondering what else they can do. So I don't believe that everyone should be tested for their hormones, but right now there's quite a lot of information out there when it comes to hormonal levels, and this can make a huge difference. And I've seen it for a lot of patients that have supplemented in some form for their hormonal levels, that has made a huge difference in terms of their energy overall. Now, if you feel that something's not right with you, please see a health practitioner and get it tested, because just getting those basic tests would give you an indicator anyways as to where you're sitting and what your baseline is. And sometimes you may have to see someone that actually focuses on hormonal levels, and that is their expertise, because there's certain hormonal tests that often don't get tested as a normal regular test. And this is something that maybe an expert in hormones may be able to talk to you about and even test. Now, another thing that often gets missed that is quite basic is really breathing when it comes to physiology. Now, this might sound boring, and I'm not going to debate whether you should be breathing through your nose or breathing through your mouth, because I've spoken about this before, and there's been a lot of benefits of breathing through your nose. But the reality is, for most people, they don't actually focus on breathing, because they might be having shallow breaths, and especially when they get quite stressed in life, they might not be breathing as deeply as they need to essentially relax their body and also increase the amount of oxygen that is getting into your body and back into your cells. Now, getting oxygen to your body is another physiological process that is very important in order to increase the amount of energy that you have. Now, one way to find out is if you actually took 30 days whereby you spent that time, maybe even 2 to 5 minutes every day, having a bit of a breathing practice during your day, where you're taking deep breaths in and having deep exhales out, you will find this will boost your energy. And I especially find this to be beneficial in the afternoons when you get that drop in energy, and just having a couple of sessions whereby you take 3 deep breaths in and breathing out slowly will boost a lot of energy. And so this is something that gets missed a lot, but it's very simple to rectify, and you can look up anywhere about different breathing techniques. I have mentioned it earlier in other episodes that I've done, and they will definitely help you when it comes down to increasing your energy that way. Now, the next and final component, which I believe is the most important, comes down to the mental aspect as well as psychology. Now, for most people, you would think this is a soft skill, and most people glaze by this because they don't believe that this will increase your energy. But the reality is, what you think and how you think about the events that happen in your life actually change how much energy you feel within yourself. Now, one thing I would mention is that if you were goal-driven and you had a purpose, as in you knew why you were doing a certain activity because you were going to get something that was much bigger than yourself, you will be driven and have more energy than someone that just goes with the flow and feels that I need to go to work because it pays the bills and I need to get paid, and I just need to wake up the next day and do it over and over again until I wait till the weekend. Now, just by me saying that, the first one with goals and having purpose energizes me, and the second one, whereby I'm going with the flow, just feels like there's not much energy there. Now, I'm not saying you need to get excited and pump yourself up like the motivational speakers talk about, but the reality is the way your self-talk is, the way you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, can change the amount of energy that you have during the day, and it can also change how your day goes. Now, another factor that I think will make a difference when it comes to the mental aspect is that for most people, we have high energy events that make us excited. So think of a holiday, think of a meeting or meeting someone that gets you excited when you're going to do it. And then there are events that are quite boring and also probably drain our energy. Probably some meetings that we feel that way, that we feel like, why am I even here? I should be somewhere else. And why are we doing this again? Now, both of them are important in life, but the way I actually schedule my life is that I try to get more than 70% in the bucket of what energizes me. And then I have another 30% of the things that I need to do that probably don't energize me as much. And for most people, you'll find that that 30% that doesn't energize you is probably the thing that is on your to-do list that you just never do, but you have to do, which will make a difference in your work or even your life. So by scheduling it in sort of a 70-30, it doesn't have to be that percentage. You can even do an 80-20 if that's what you want to do. But that will basically manage your energy when it comes to the mental component as well. You have to remember when it comes to the psychology is that the story you tell yourself basically creates your day. Now, if you start off your day whereby you wake up late, you spill a drink on yourself before getting in the car, you realize you have no petrol in the car, and then you start driving and you're going to be late for work, and then every traffic light is red. This is the story you have created in your mind, despite the few setbacks that you had when you started your day. Another example would be starting off your day reading the news about wars or things that are happening that are nasty, which in no way am I saying is not important, but essentially starting off your day with this negative energy or negative influence in your mind is affecting how your day will turn out as well, or even affecting the thoughts that you have in your head. For most people, and especially for myself, as I can attest, is that the self-talk that I used to have was very negative. It would be that you're not strong enough to do it. You have to be tougher. You have to push through. What doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And as much as this builds resilience and probably was important when I was young, it was probably not productive and probably not healthy for myself, because when you get great results by thinking that way, you then start to believe that that is the only way you're going to get great results. And unless you burn yourself or unless you punish yourself or you work extra hard, you're not going to feel that you're productive or you're getting the results that you need. And so for most people, I would say having that self-talk that is not beneficial probably reduces your energy rather than increases it. And having a healthy self-talk whereby you're talking to yourself in a way that, yes, you made a mistake. Yes, you learn from this mistake, but then just think of all the growth that you had as a result will make a huge difference in your life. So what is the solution when it comes to increasing your energy? Now, I've mentioned a couple of the techniques that I use or the tips that I've used in the past. But I believe for everyone, it comes down to those three components, and you really need to grade yourself. Now, the challenging part is it is very subjective. So my recommendation is find someone that you trust. It could be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague that knows you well, and grade yourself and get them to grade you and then compare notes. Now, when it comes to physiology or even pathology, if you're not feeling right either mentally or physically, this is when I would seek advice of a health practitioner in order to at least get some basic tests done to ensure that there's nothing wrong with you. Only you can tell if you're not feeling right or you feel that there's something going on. Getting a basic panel of blood tests will give you an indicator of where you lie. Now, it may come back normal, but at the same time, it essentially gives you an idea that at least it's nothing critical when it comes to your illness. And specifically, if you think hormonal factors are in play, I would seek the advice of an expert in that field as well to ensure that this may not be something that is causing your energy levels to be low. Now, moving on to the mental and psychological aspect, I think one thing that works, especially for me, and I can attest to this, is the fact that you have to be kind to yourself, and you have to have a bit of insight on the way you speak to yourself, the thoughts that you have, and how you actually take each day as it comes. And the final part that I'll leave you with is that for most people, it is a combination of all three. And depending on the different seasons, you might find that you're weaker in one and stronger in another, depending on the different stages of your life. And it's really balancing all three that's going to get you that energy that you want. And especially when it comes to the mental and psychological component, I feel for most people, the story they tell themselves, the thoughts that they have in their head, and how they actually treat themselves makes a huge difference. And I often implore people to think about a loved one and whether you would say the same things that you say to yourself to that loved one if they were going through a challenge. And most of the time, the answer is going to be no. So it's time to actually be kind to yourself and notice the difference in terms of how you feel when it comes to your energy levels. And to finally conclude, one of the basic things that you can do is essentially avoid the things that are draining you of energy. If you find yourself feeling low energy, hanging out with certain people, I would avoid them. If you're eating certain foods and you feel your energy levels are low, I'll probably avoid that. If you don't think you're exercising enough and you're not moving, and you feel your energies are low, I will start exercising and moving. And most importantly, if you feel you're quite stressed, I will start working on that, because that would improve everything else, including your sleep and all the other behaviors that you have. This wraps up this episode of Peak Performance Hacks. All the links and resources are in the video description or in the resource section, whether it is on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a review so that more people can discover our podcast and it could benefit them as well. Until I catch you next time, speak soon.